I'm just going to start by asking everyone who is not speaking to, except for planning board members, it's up to you. But please put yourself on mute just so we can reduce the amount of ambient noise that's happening. And then I will go on to read the suggested disclaimer. In accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Information and connection links to the meeting are provided on the Town of Plymouth website at www.plymouth-nh.org. All right, we will now move on to a roll call. Planning board members, please let us know that you're here. Carl.
Present.
Marianne.
Here.
John.
Present.
Mark.
Here.
Phil.
Here.
And Steve.
Here.
And Steve, you're an alternate. I'd like to invite you to be a voting member this evening. All right, let's look at the minutes from January 7th. Any comments, edits, suggestions on the minutes from our last meeting? It's hard for me to see all of the planning board members in the sea of faces. So if there's no comments, if there are comments, just pop in and say something. If not, a motion to approve the minutes would be.
I will move to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay. I will now read the roll. Signify you are in favor of approving the minutes by saying aye. Steve.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Marianne.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
And me, aye. All right, minutes are approved. Next, I'd like to invite any member of the public to speak on a matter unrelated to tonight's agenda. So if you're here to talk about the zoning amendments, we'll have some time for that. But if you have any other matter to speak to the board about, please go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you and allow you to speak. I'm looking through all the little faces. Okay. I don't see anybody. So next up, we are on our second public hearing on our proposed zoning and amendments. Tonight we're going to do things a little differently than we did at the last hearing. We're going to go through each amendment one by one. I will describe each of these amendments and invite other planning board members to discuss or to sort of describe what we're doing as well. When I open up the public hearing, I would really like to hear, actually, you know what, before we jump into that, I do want to go through some of the comments we heard last night just to summarize a few things, because I'd really like to focus tonight's discussion on new things, voices we haven't heard, issues we haven't heard. We did hear the concerns and comments from 2 weeks ago, so I just want to make sure we are not having the same conversation we had in our last public hearing. So does that work for the rest of the board if we go through the comments, just a quick bullet list? Okay, great. Agriculture is part of our heritage. There is an agriculture committee. It should be consulted. There were some questions about what problem the amendments were solving. Comments about the agricultural zone working and should be left alone. We need to talk with more people in the agricultural zone. Changes to the lot size will create sprawl. Technology allows for better and more efficient use of smaller lots, so increasing lot size and setbacks is not efficient. Access is more important than frontage, and DOT controls access on state highways. In the Route 3A area, there's a hodgepodge of businesses and residences, so the area won't look like a gateway, which is what one of the proposed zoning changes was, a change in name. There's no water and sewer in this area. Wetlands in this area could be impacted by more development. Wildlife corridors could be more impacted by development. In the Route 3 area south of downtown, based on lot size, currently there are 21 non-conforming lots. Proposed changes will increase this to bring it to a total of 37 non-conforming lots. 35-foot maximum height would mean barns are non-conforming. Some apartments exist. May become non-conforming. Fences on properties would become non-conforming. There were some general comments about using conditional use permits instead of the special exception process, which sends things to the ZBA. Conditional use permits are only allowed to be used in conjunction with innovative land use regulations. The conditional use permit lacks specific criteria, and zoning changes need to be discussed in face-to-face meetings. I've had some other comments that have popped up. Concerns about the changes of Tenny Mountain Highway will only go 500 feet north of the road. This will result in property being split into two zones. There are some suggestions about extending it to the Baker River. Okay, so those are the comments summarized that we've heard last time. So what we'll do is we'll jump in. There's three separate amendments. These will be three different votes on the plan is for them to be three different votes that are presented at the vote election the day before town meeting. So we're going to go through these one at a time. The first one is amendment number 1. The proposal is to amend the current industrial commercial district to extend to a northern boundary of the industrial commercial district. This northern boundary will extend 500 feet north of Tenny Mountain Highway center line. The road frontage requirements will increase from 100 to 150 feet. Other changes, minimum lot size will increase to 1 acre. It'll allow civic and institutional uses. First floor residential will be permitted via CUP, conditional use permit, and changes in the change name will go, name will change to the Tenny Mountain Highway mixed use zone. All right. So I feel like most of the faces have been here already, but we can talk a little bit more. This is sort of the beginning of the changes that we were starting to think about on the planning board, and what really sort of pushed us to thinking about this. Partly is or in most part, is the master plan, which involved a lot of feedback from town residents about what we want to see in the town of Plymouth. We value the outcome of that. We value our rural area. We value the economic vibrancy and Tenny Mountain Highway and the downtown area. So we're taking these steps in the proposed zoning changes based on the master plan and the suggestions and feedback and comments that we received in the master planning process. Planning board members, I feel like I'm going about this in a roundabout way, and I'm just wondering if anybody has any feedback or any planning board members have anything to add about this zone in particular before we open it up to public hearing.
Hi, Rebecca. The only thing I'd like to clarify is that I think our area description needs to clarify that we are the area to the north of Tenny Mountain Highway will be extended to the east with the intersection of the Baker River, and to the west, I forget the name of the brook, but you're familiar with that. But
it's Millbrook there.
Millbrook
Yeah.
to the west. So the existing ICD is primarily on the south side of Tenny Mountain Highway. This is intended to extend it to the north side of Tenny Mountain Highway, and that would extend further to the east to the intersection with the Baker River. So that's just a clarifying point for the public.
And that 500 feet is north of the highway in between those two areas.
Yes.
Other things to add from the board or staff? All right. So in a moment, I will open up the public hearing on this amendment and just this amendment. I welcome new comments that we haven't heard from in our last meeting, and we'll limit to, just because we have a lot of people here tonight, let's limit those comments to 3 minutes. So when I open the public hearing in a moment, please raise your hand. I'll call on you, and you'll get your 3 minutes to speak. Okay, so 6:39, and we'll open up the public hearing on amendment number 1. All right, so I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, there's one. David Kent. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and you've got your 3 minutes.
I'm not going to be repetitive, but I am against taking away the special exception rules which protect neighbors and protect neighboring businesses. Thank you.
Thanks. Will?
Hi. Yeah, so, we provided a written comment ahead of this, so I don't want to be too redundant. If you've already reviewed it, I didn't hear much mention of it, but I'd like to hear the board's sort of thoughts on on the northern boundary. And in particular, I've been working with Mike on the Riverside Landing property, and it's going to, that 500-foot dimension is going to intersect existing development. And so I'm interested to hear if there's any thought to modify that boundary line.
So it's my understanding in our zoning ordinance that if you have frontage in both zones, then you have to adhere to the more strict zone. But none of those areas, to my understanding, have frontage in both. If these changes were to take place, there's not frontage both on the in the Tenney Mountain Highway mixed use zone and in the existing zone. So
I think that it says that you can, if you have frontage on, the zone that you have frontage on will dictate, but you can only extend it up to a certain dimension past the limit of the district. I need to pull up this section, but it said, I think you could go 75 feet further with those dimensional criteria. So I've just, it could create an issue for that property.
okay, I would think the issue would be more on one of the further amendments because currently all that development right now is in the agricultural zone. Market basket, that's all in the agricultural zone right there. So
right. So if the agricultural zone amendment goes through, then the lot coverage requirements change significantly, and a portion of that market basket liquor store hotel property would be straddling the line, and those were all designed based on that 75% lot coverage. And if and when they need to subdivide off one of those buildings, it would create a non-conforming situation, I think. So I guess I thought the intent of this modification to the boundary was, it seemed like you were trying to include all of the existing development. So I just wanted to find out if that was the intent, and if it could be modified, I guess, in that area or throughout the district.
I think for this year, well, I guess June, correct me if I'm wrong, any significant changes beyond wording, June, I think you know where I'm going with this, so maybe you can explain it, because I'm gonna mess it up.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm June Hammond Rowan, and the statutes do state that the board has put forth these amendments as written, and the board could make sort of textual or editorial changes, but not any substantial changes to the text as presented without having another hearing. And one of the issues that is just timing, because everything has to be to the town clerk by February 1st. So the board does not have the opportunity to notice and have another hearing. So any edits to what's been presented can only be fairly minor, kind of, as it was told, textual or editorial.
Thank you, June. What I can tell you, Will, is that we did make a decision to not follow property lines, and zoning subcommittee folks step in if I'm messing this up, but we made a decision. It was too difficult to describe the zone and to actually go by each property line around it to draw the zone line. So we made a choice to make a line instead of following property lines. Does that sound right to the zoning subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay. What I guess while I'm talking, the only other kind of major question I have about how this is going to be voted on is it all or nothing? In other words, do all three amendments have to pass, or can one pass and the other two fail, for instance?
yes, they're getting presented individually. So,
So that just presents a major problem for the northern side of Tenny Mountain Highway. If the agricultural amendment goes through and the ICD doesn't, then, you know, the lot coverage requirement and the setbacks, the frontage, all that stuff is going to create crazy non-conforming situations. And, you know, it's, I think that's the biggest problem for me.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other comments? I see Ben there. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to know, what are we trying to accomplish by doing this? What is the end game? What is the benefit to the town going to be?
So, as outlined in the master plan, which is a document that was generated based on input and participation from all town residents, voters, we looked at what do people value about the town and how is that reflected in our current zoning ordinance. And what we heard is people value the rural nature of the town. They value the economic center and opportunities that are around. And folks identified which areas in town they think are appropriate for development, which areas are not appropriate for development. And I've got a dog trying to break into the room here. Sorry. So the point is not necessarily to fix an existing problem per se, but to really think about where we want to see development in town and where do we want to see open space and how do we balance both of those things. I mean, you think development, economic activity, and rural open space, those can be kind of conflicting with one another. So trying to determine the areas in town where we want to see development, areas in town where we want to see open space, and how can we make our zoning reflect that that identified need.
I think the agricultural zone has done a very good job of taking care of themselves. And I don't think that we need to mess with it. And I think we are doing something for the sake of doing something that has no benefit for us. No benefit whatsoever. And I fail to see the benefit to the town.
Thank you. Other comments about zoning amendment number 1, which is extending the changing the name of the industrial commercial zone to the Tenny Mountain Highway mixed use zone and increasing its size a little bit. Okay.
Rebecca, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lisa. Hang on a second.
Thank you. I am a little bit surprised that the Conservation Commission was not part of any of the discussions of these zoning changes. I would have thought that we would be a natural town partner to work with and provide early input. So you may find that some of my thoughts on this are not necessarily what you might have expected. In looking at the map, one of the first things that I noticed from a conservation perspective is that the Baker River will be covered by industrial zone all the way to the boundary with Rumney. All of the streams coming in will cross through that industrial zone. And there is no area along that stretch of the Baker River between where Hannaford's is all the way to the traffic circle where the streams that feed the Baker River don't pass through that zone. So my concern is that there is going to be a lot of additional salt, industrial chemical, or other use materials entering the Baker River and no way to mitigate it with a natural landscape. So that's my primary concern, is the impacts on the Baker River.
Thank you. Anyone else on this zoning amendment number 1?
I do. I have something to say. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So some of you probably remember the difficulty that we had. I know John Renlett does. I know Neil MacGyver does. Myself and Mike Conklin, especially, when we were trying to entice Market Basket to come to Plymouth. And that was a very touch and go situation with bringing them in. And my hope is that anything that we do to make changes on Tenny Mountain Highway, that we take into consideration the views of the businesses that are already there. Have you heard from Market Basket yet?
We got a letter from somebody representing them, management company. Yep.
Okay, so were they against this or were they for this?
I think we'll go over the correspondence after the public hearing. So I don't have it in front of me. I don't think it was in favor. If someone else, another planning board member remembers to generalize their comments, or if they feel like they can generalize the comments, but I think they were not in favor.
I would caution the board on making any changes to the Tenny Mountain Highway area without first doing your due diligence and speaking with some of the businesses on that road, because I am fearful. We heard with Will Davis, and I am fearful that what this planning board might be doing is harming Plymouth. With the effort that we went to get Market Basket in and to see that, I believe it was 70 or 80% of the community all wanted Market Basket in. And had this change happened prior, we may never have gotten them. So did your master plan note that vote that the town of Plymouth did? Is that anywhere in the master plan where they wanted to see this type of development along Tenny Mountain Highway, or was that just not mentioned?
Sorry, first of all, I'd like to call it's our master plan. It's not the planning board's master plan. This is something that belongs to the entire town of Plymouth. But what vote are you talking about?
When the select board was enticing Market Basket to come in the first time, the town had a vote. There was a warrant article, and it was overwhelmingly in support of Market Basket or businesses like Market Basket being placed on Tenny Mountain Highway between the river and Tenny Mountain Highway. There was an overwhelming, and I believe it was either 78 or 80%. It was just overwhelming. And I didn't read anything mentioning that vote. And this would have been, let's see, Neil, do you remember? Or John, do you remember that?
Hang on. If you don't mind, I think I'm just going to pause here. I think that the answer is the master plan incorporated town-to-town's feedback. I don't think it reflected that vote at the time, but I don't think that the master plan isn't going to refer back to a vote about a specific business going into a spot in town. What it did was look at.
It wasn't a specific business.
Okay, so I guess I don't have it. I don't have an answer for you on that one. All I can tell you is that the master plan took into the account of looked at where folks had provided feedback, said that they think business is appropriate, where it's not appropriate, where we'd like to see open space, where we'd like to see residential development. That's the kind of feedback on the master plan.
Yeah, and I would agree. I just, when I was still on the planning board before I left to go to the select board, that was a comment that I made reoccurring, that vote was extremely important because it was a vote that the townspeople had, that their sentiments were that was the place where they would like to see, not a specific business, but where they would like to see business happen on that side of Tenny Mountain Highway. There was a considerable amount of energy In that vote, the people spoke, and I mentioned it a couple of times on the planning board, how that should reflect and be mentioned because it was so important in the master plan. And then it didn't quite make it into the master plan. That's just all I want to say.
Thank you. Other comments on zoning amendment number 1?
I had a question.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Hi, I'm Brent Harlow. Catch that?
Go ahead.
Brent Harlow.
Yep. Go ahead, Brent.
I noticed that there's some of the wording says industrial. Can somebody explain that that means industry can come into town? Factories, steel mills? Am I off base on this?
So I think what you're seeing is the current zone that we're proposing to change is called the industrial commercial zone. I would caution anyone from looking at the name of a zone and interpreting the uses and assuming the uses match up with what the zone is called. I'd be more of an advocate for calling them numbers so we don't get confused. But so the uses, now I can't remember what the uses are currently. Phil or Steve, do you remember did we make it not permitted for industrial use?
This is my question.
Planning board?
I'd have to look at it.
I just
I
don't
don't
have it right in
believe
front of me.
we limited any uses. I think we have more clarified uses.
Mhm. Unless they got an amendment or variance, and they could put a
June, go
factory.
ahead.
That's
Go ahead.
an option.
So Rebecca, I can just help jump in here. Currently, much of the area along Tenny Mountain Highway was zoned either agricultural or industrial commercial development. So that area that currently is already zoned industrial commercial development, industry is a permitted use, and industry is defined as the assembly, manufacture, processing, packaging, or other operations to goods or materials. So we currently, within that industrial commercial area, do allow a variety of types of industry, okay? And industry is allowed by special exception in where it's zoned agricultural throughout the entire town. So there's a lot of area where industry is currently either permitted or permitted by special exception.
Thank
Well,
you.
that helps. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, other comments about the changes to the industrial commercial zone in Amendment 1? Okay, let's move on to number 2. This is amending the agricultural zone in the area. So this is let's see. This is amending the remainder of the agricultural. This is, let me see if I can. Having trouble describing this, not in incremental ways. So this is to amend the agricultural zone. Change the name to rural zone, change the minimum lot size from 1 to 3 acres, increase the minimum road frontage from 100 to 200 feet, increase minimum front setback from 30 to 50 feet, increase minimum side setback and the rear setback from 15 to 25, and change the allowable impervious surface coverage of a lot from 75 to 25. And to address the last comment from the last person, industrial uses will not be allowed, but currently permitted uses will either stay the same or be allowed through conditional use permit. And just, this is a amendment to the entire agricultural zone. Our next amendment looks at sections of the agricultural zone along state highways, except along Tenny Mountain Highway. So we'll be talking about more specific changes to specific areas in the agricultural zone. But like another commenter mentioned, that these will be considered one at a time. So if the Gateway District Amendment number 3 doesn't pass, if this does, then these changes will affect everything in the agricultural. Board members, are there any comments, points of clarity to bring up before I allow people to begin making comments on this amendment? Okay, so before I open it for comments, just a reminder that this is if the amendment that covers the Route 3 south of town, Route 3 north of town, and 3A to Tenny Mountain Highway. If you have comments about that specific gateway district, that will be covered in amendment number 3. But again, comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please raise your hand and I will call on you.
Rebecca, can I address one issue before we open it up to the public?
Yes, please.
So the question of the impervious surface is changing from 75% to 25%, but if this is applied to the minimum lot size, there is no change to the total area of impervious surface. So under the existing zoning, you're allowed to have up to 0.75 acres of impervious surface, which is 75% of 1 acre. Under the proposed change, it would be 25% of 3 acres, which is also 0.75 acres. So the numbers look different, but in reality, the amount of impervious surface on a lot would be the same, but the lot size would be bigger. So that's just a clarification that I wanted to touch on after the last hearing.
Thank you, Phil. Okay. Please raise your hand if you have a comment or question about amendment number 2. Neil. Click, you're still on mute.
I'm trying to get it.
Oh.
This seems to me to be an arbitrary approach to the character of the agricultural zone, and I think it would be counterproductive because it would be tying up productive agricultural land where the state would require, say, if there's no water or sewer available, it would require a minimum of 1 acre and possibly up to 5 acres to subdivide, depending on soils and slopes. And then if you do have water and sewer, which I don't believe most of the ag zone doesn't, you could have a half-acre lot. But to me, it would be cutting into the agricultural land that the landowners would like to preserve, and it wouldn't be a productive use to that land.
Thank you. Bruce.
Just a comment on what Phil just said. I guess what I would ask is, in the current agricultural zone, how many 1 acre lots do we have right now that are going to be affected by this impervious max lot coverage? If you change it to 25%, that ends up to be a very small, very large part of the 1 acre lot. If the 1 acre lot is already existing but doesn't have any building on it or anything. So you're going to end up restricting what a person can do with their lot, unless there's some consideration of that in the way this is put out, because I would guess that there may be some 1 acre lots out here in the agricultural zone that you put a 25% max impervious surface on it is going to affect somebody's use of that land.
Thank
That's
you.
all.
Ina.
Thank you. I am here tonight to speak against the proposed changes to the Plymouth zoning ordinance, particularly the elimination of the ag zone. I'm going to address the Gateway District a little bit because I put it in here. I wrote before I knew you were going to address them separately. An increase in restrictions on current ag zone properties. I live on Route 3 South on agricultural land that could be significantly impacted by this change. As you stated, and as Ms. Hanson stated at the beginning, the goal was to put in place the regulatory framework as set forth by the master plan. Yet in reading the master plan, I believe the current zone names and existing requirements better meet the desires expressed by the town citizens. Specifically, the town supports agriculture, and I've heard other people say that. Natural beauty and local agriculture were highlighted as two of the characteristics of Plymouth that it was most important to maintain. 67% of the respondents said it should encourage agriculture. Only 30% supported development restrictions on prime farmlands, but instead preferred to allow development but put conditions on it to protect the environment. One of the land use policy implementation goals was to review the zoning ordinance and site plan to ensure they are truly agricultural friendly. How does eliminating the agricultural zone and renaming it rural zone reflect the residents' desire to support agriculture? Do we really want to eliminate the zone whose expressed purpose is to promote and permit agricultural land use industries and their companion and supporting industries? The master plan indicates that development in the ag zone is already limited because, quote, although the agricultural zone has similar requirements as other zones, the density of development in rural areas is generally limited by other factors, the steep slopes and wetlands, and not by the zoning and development requirements. Adding these natural occurring factors to the expanded setbacks may make it extremely difficult to site new buildings or potentially subdivide a lot from an agricultural property. Although I know that most farm owners like to keep their property as whole as possible, I've also seen through the history of the parcels in our area that there have been times when landowners have had to subdivide parcels either to sell to have money to continue to maintain the rest of the farm, or perhaps to provide a house for a descendant who may want to continue to participate in the ag operation. In combination with the existing restrictions around steep slopes and wetlands, creating that lot may be extremely challenging and unfortunately result in buildings or lots not in the best locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Ahern, go ahead.
So thanks, Rebecca, for having this second hearing. I want to point out that it was 2006 when we had this discussion. Wasn't 12 years ago. It was a few more than that. In talking with people about tonight's meeting, first of all, there's a lot of people that I spoke to that didn't have access to Zoom, didn't have a camera, or they didn't even know if they had a microphone on their computer. So there's a lot of people that's left behind by Zoom. And through this digital age, because of the pandemic, it is increasingly hard for them to be able to voice their concerns about this. And back then it was 200 property owners that represented 7,600 acres in this town. I found a letter from a couple, and they had 621 acres and in Plymouth. And they wanted, back in 2006, they wanted to be on record to be against this. And I just, I found it. It was the Favres, and it's not relevant today, but they had said that. I just wanted people to be reminded of that maybe are new to the board. I've talked to a lot of people in town in the last 2 or 3 days. I don't think I came across one individual in the town that I spoke to that knew that this was happening. And I don't think there was anything, again, sneaky that was being done. It's partly just technology driven that they weren't catching it for whatever reason. And the presentation, the YouTube video that went out, I don't know if anybody really saw that, but that's something I wanted to point out. I am concerned about the splintering of the ag zone, and there's cookie cutter approaches that you can apply, but it just doesn't work on Plymouth. And when you take 3 acres for a house lot in the agricultural zone or in the forested area, that's a pretty good size chunk of property. And that starts splintering these zones. And normally a farmer has a plan for his agricultural zone, but if he has to sell a lot, and the lot, that 3-acre lot, might go right into the middle of his plowed field or in the middle of his row crops. And that makes farming very difficult. So we're not preserving farmland by any means by these proposed zoning. It's detrimental. And not only with the ag fields, but the forested areas. You take 3 acres that's out of a forested area, and the landowner probably may not be able to maintain that 3 acres properly like a larger lot might be, where he can take care of and get the trees cut. Whereas it's 3 acres, a landowner wants to cut to maintain, he's going to pay $1,000 a tree to take it down potentially. Whereas with a lot, and he's got 100 acres or 40 acres, he has a forester that maintains the plan, a forestry plan in place. And most landowners have that. And if we're talking about 3 acres, he's probably not going to pay a forester to do something, and it's going to be very hard to maintain that land. So we're not looking after the forested land in Plymouth by this proposed. We're actually doing the opposite. When you put 3 acres, you're going to see fences go up, whether it's on ag field, whether it's in forested land. You might see fences. You might see in that back 3 acres, you might see vehicles being stored. That's probably not the best interest of Plymouth. The best stewards of the land are the farmers and the forestry individuals that have been taking care of this land and got us to where we are now. And I hate to sell them short by adding these onerous proposed zoning. That would make it very difficult to continue on what they've done. And the last thing that I'd want to mention is that when you take and go from 1 acre to 3 acres, you're pricing out lots. So it's a developer putting in 5 or 6 lots in a 15-acre piece or even a 5 or 6 acre piece. That makes it affordable housing for people to move, young families to move to Plymouth. When you start imposing 3 acres, that makes the cost that much more to get the roads where they need to go. It's less lots, and it's just going to cost the families more money to buy a house in Plymouth.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start using a timer. I forgot to set the timer before, so unless June, are you still good to be the timer? I completely forgot.
I have a little flag here that's got multiple colors.
Okay. I'll keep an eye on it.
Point out that Grace Garvey has her hand up, in case you didn't see that.
I did not see that. Grace, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm here with my husband, Todd, and as you know, we live, or some of you know, we live in the agricultural zone, so named. First of all, I really want to applaud the planning board's efforts all around, both in vetting with the community members what they see as the vision for the new master plan, what they see as the vision of Plymouth in total. I also want to applaud them for writing the plan and doing it so well with that vision in mind, getting all the feedback from the community members. We participated in that process. And then I want to applaud the planning board for putting these zoning very thoughtfully and professionally, putting these proposed zoning changes together. I don't think this happened in a vacuum. I participated personally in the process along the way. So I'm not really surprised to see these, particularly in the agricultural zone, because I was particularly interested in knowing what was going to happen and what was going to be proposed. I personally support all of the changes. Excuse me. We're not farmers necessarily of fields, but we're farmers of trees. In fact, we harvest trees for our only heating source, which is wood. So we're very mindful of how that process is done. We We like the changes that are being proposed for the permitted uses, because I think right now it's kind of a free for all. You can put anything, you can just put anything you want in our neighborhood. We're out on Texas Hill Road on the Bridgewater end of Texas Hill Road. And I also, I understand the concern about going from 1 to 3 acres. I get that. But I want to tell you a story. We are in a conversation with one of our neighbors who owns over 20 acres. We're in a conversation with them about buying their property. And let me tell you, they are so fearful of having someone come in and develop that 20 acres into 20 house lots. Just envision that. So their vision is to have it remaining rural, forested, in the spirit of what the ag zone is supposed to be. It preserves the rural characteristics of this area. It helps protect habitat. We happened to be on Plymouth Mountain a couple weeks ago. We ran into a couple who literally drove up here to Plymouth to climb Plymouth Mountain. They love seeing the habitat, the signs of habitat out in the woods up here at the Plymouth Mountain area. So I think, you know, to carve up 1 acre lots out here and turn them into residential areas is really going to impact that. There are specifically residential areas that allow for those 1 acre lots, that affordable housing that Mike's talking about. So I think less development, meaning larger acreages, really preserves this zone. I got a yellow card. And it's going to be less dense. And I know there's been some conversation about kind of kicking this can down the road and giving it another year, but I really think that vetting process has already occurred. So I would encourage the planning board to move forward to warrant article on this particular number 2 proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Dean Yeton, go ahead. You're on mute still.
You're on mute, sir.
You hear me now?
We got you. Thank you.
Okay. No, I've just, all of us natives, you know, if you're a native of the area and you know the area, you know that you take 1 acre and make it into 3 acres. You know, that is a waste of land and it's a taking of private rights. We need to leave this alone just so we can do what, like we've always not controlled, but we've always taken care of our own zone. And, you know, the parents came here in 1927 and we've been taking care of it ever since then. There's the Aherns down south and everything else. We're lucky we do have sewer down this road, and I could lament on all these changes that they're totally wrong and they're totally taking private rights away. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. David, go ahead.
Good evening. I have to ask a question before I can make a comment. I've searched all over the web. I've searched through the zoning ordinance. I cannot find a conditional use permit form for this kind of property. Does one exist?
Not currently.
Then I think this amendment is fatally flawed. You're asking us to put into a regulation with unknown criteria. And if a person were to come to town now and say, I want to do this after this were to pass, they don't know what they have to do. And to invent something after the town passes it, I think is a flaw. I think it's a legal flaw. And I hate to, I don't offer legal opinions on things, but there's something wrong with doing things in that order. That criteria ought to exist at the time when the voters are asked to vote on a new kind of zoning amendment, if it's going to be applied in the law. Now, as I read the articles on this, it says you can do this, but you have to have criteria, and you don't have any. So I think this ought to be withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on amendment number 2?
Ahern has her hand up, and it looks like Ben Billen, Sue Wood. We got a couple more people.
Okay, who had their hand up? The first person you said?
Omer Ahern has had their hand up for a little bit. So.
Oh, okay, Omer, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me? I'm on the phone.
We can hear you loud and
Oh,
clear.
no. You can't hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I want to echo the sentiments and the statements made by Michael Ahern, my brother, and the sentiments that Dean Yetton made. You're messing with the private property rights of people. If you require Love Hollow Farm, Michael Ahern, to sell a 1 acre lot as a 3 acre lot, then you're going to take 2,200 Christmas trees out of his business because he's got to sell 2 extra lots, 2 extra acres, and that's going to hurt him. I have been dealing with farmers in 3 different counties in this real estate end of things. And when you start forcing people to subdivide their land into larger lots, you're going to take away their ability to be better farmers and make a living. Because if they can't make a living off their farm, they're going to sell it, and then you're going to not have the farmland. You're not going to have the beauty that's been talked about this evening. So I am a landowner out there up on Cummings Hill Road, and I have a certified tree farm up there. And I just see what you're talking, this planning board is talking about doing is a big mistake for all the people in the town of Plymouth. And actually, it's going to hurt folks all throughout, in my opinion, Grafton County. And as a county commissioner, I'm concerned about those things as well. So I really think you should not do this to your agricultural area. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, who else is up here? Ben, go ahead.
I just want to speak out against this. I think it's, again, doing something for the sake of doing something and not really knowing what the end game is on this. So I'm against this.
Thank you. All right, other comments?
May I make a comment?
I think Sue Wood has had her hand up for a little bit, so you can be on deck after her. Go ahead, Sue.
I just want to say that I am opposed to this for all the reasons that have been stated. I'm not going to go over all of it again, but I feel like agricultural zone speaks for itself. People understand it when they hear it's agriculture. If it gets changed to rural, I just feel that over time, things are just going to get slipped in. And agricultural speaks for itself. And I really think you are making a huge mistake trying to get this through. Thank you.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I absolutely agree. When you talk about rural, you just think about a nice countryside surrounding the town. And I had heard that the purpose of changing the name was to bring clarity as to what the zone was for. If you're talking about a pleasant countryside instead of what agriculture is really there for, which is cultivating land and raising crops and the feeding, breeding, and raising of livestock, farming, that's what agriculture is for. And yeah, there are other things that take place within the agricultural zones, but the main reason for the agricultural zones is for those purposes, as opposed to a rural setting. So rather than clarifying it, it's going to muddy the waters in regards to people who are coming into town. They're like, oh, I want to live in this nice rural zone, and they find out that they're buying a farm in farmland. So it just makes no sense to change the name. We've been a very agricultural town. I mean, Plymouth is an amazing, beautiful, eclectic town. We are agricultural, and we're commercial, and we're residential and collegiate and family and recreation and everything. And we should keep what we are. We've always been an ag town. We had the best ag fair around. That's gone, but we're still agricultural. That's all I have.
Thank you. Go ahead, Neil.
I can understand the board's concern regarding the development and increasing development of residential properties and the desire to maintain open space. But at the same time, we have an extensive agricultural community in this town, and the interests in agriculture are increasing. And I believe that we need to keep in mind the needs of the people who are involved in agriculture in this town. And maybe we should postpone submitting these questions to the warrant articles this year. COVID-19 has had a severe effect on a lot of people, and it's made it difficult for people to stay, keep their attention on developing matters. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Neil. Any other comments on?
Matt Yeton, excuse me, Rebecca, Matt Yeton's had his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Hi, thank you. I just want to speak in opposition of this amendment. The Second Amendment is arbitrary from the development and open space that was stated in the master plan. I'm a firm believer in both development and open space, but in no way does the Second Amendment prevent these from happening further. I just don't feel it's a direct correlation or reflection of what's currently in the ag land. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Jen, I think I saw you had your hand up.
I did, thank you. I just wanted to speak in support of the new zoning proposal. My husband, Chris Buckley, and I ended up buying an additional 10 acres to the 34 acres that we own already on Texas Hill Road that abut Plymouth Mountain. And the reason we did that is because we got wind that a developer was going to come in and purchase this 10.7 acres to subdivide and build 5 other additional homes. We also live across from a property that is, well, in a shambles and not cared for very well, and a 3-acre parcel that could be subdivided into further properties. We are very good stewards of the land, and I feel it's really important to continue in that vein and totally support what the planning board is trying to do here and keep residential building closer to the downtown of Plymouth area and keep open fields, open space in this rural area.
Thanks, Jen.
Sorry, because you're listed.
Go ahead, Jim.
State your name for the record so we can get that in the minutes.
Jen,
oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, sorry, the last speaker.
Oh, sorry, it's Jennifer Morris, Morris, Morris.
Thank you.
Okay, new comments that are not echoing what we've already heard so far this evening. Anyone who hasn't spoken?
Yeah, Rebecca, it's Greg.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Greg Nettner. I'd just like to speak in support of the Planning Commission's efforts in this area. It's going to be difficult to strike a balance that is going to be perfect for everybody. I think keeping in the forefront of our mind the intent to preserve our open lands that exist and the uses, the agricultural uses, whether it be dairy farming or Christmas tree farming or timber harvesting. Those are traditional uses that we want to maintain. Those keep the land open. And we should be able to find changes in the ordinances that will allow that type of use to continue. What we're really trying to prevent over the years is the gradual loss of our rural character, which is defined, I think, pretty well in our master plan. We don't want to harm the character of this town that we love so much by seeing these lands chopped up into little pieces. Now, maybe what's been proposed is not perfect, but I think it's a good start, and I applaud the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Anyone else who's not yet spoken this evening, or at least on this amendment?
I think Henry Ahern would like to speak.
Okay, I'm missing hands somehow. So yeah, go ahead, Henry.
I spoke at the last one, and I'm going to just reiterate that I really feel this needs to be tabled until such time as we could have a better meeting. One of the concerns that I have is a few years ago, we were going to name the agricultural zone rural residential. As soon as you start changing these names, you start changing what the feel can be, what possible rules and regulations will come down the road, because it's no longer agriculture, it is rural. Well, that means that I can put up a house on a 3-acre lot, and trying to keep open space does not need 3-acre lots. It's the putting up 3-acre house lot is exact opposite of what you're trying to do with keeping open space. So again, I feel this needs to be tabled at least until more work is done on it, and it should not be voted on at the town meeting this year. Thank you.
This is Brent Harlow.
Go ahead.
I think this is the most ridiculous proposal I've ever heard of in my life, and I'm new to this. But it sounds like that you're trying to eventually work this into where people with big money can come in and basically buy up land and build whatever they want. So I'm opposed to this. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Who else? Grace or Todd, I guess I see. You want to state your name for the record as well?
Sure, this is Todd Moore, Texas Hill Road. In the agricultural zone would be renamed rural. I appreciate all the efforts the planning board's put into it, and what I also really appreciate the longtime landowners and people who have taken care of Plymouth. That's one of the reasons that we came here, is because we like the character, and really appreciate that they are still keeping that in mind and how they manage their property. I think the purpose of zoning is to make that somewhat required, so that when later on, if someone with different ideas comes in, that we can still have some way to maintain that character. And I think the planning board has done what they can with kind of the traditional tools of zoning. You have setbacks and you have lot sizes. So if this does either get tabled or put to a vote and fails, I really hope that everybody here and more come back to have a discussion to see what can we get on the books that would maintain the character that everybody here seems to like and support. And I personally, I would like to rely a little bit more on an ordinance or something that's enforceable by the town than the goodwill. I appreciate the goodwill of my neighbors and the way that they take care of their property, but I'd like it to be a little more guaranteed. And that's my comment there. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean, do you have still comments? I know you've had your hand up for a while.
I just had, can you hear me?
Yep.
No, I just had a question on to allow any new industrial development. I mean, it almost sounds like you don't want any more tax base, and Lord knows in this town we need all the tax base we can get. So I just would like an explanation on that. And some of the industrial stuff here, you may have to get a permit to keep going. If I understand that right, am I wrong?
I think as a committee, we decided that we didn't think industrial use was appropriate in the agricultural zone, that it was contrary to what we thought the rural character of town is.
Well, on 3A, I mean, you've got house lots and everything else, but you've got some industrial there, but it's I can't see any great thing if a guy wants to do a small sawmill or something privately like that. And if you want to classify that as industrial, I don't agree with that. And I agree with Henry Aaron again that the way this COVID crap is going and everything else, I think that a lot of people never knew anything about this, including myself. And I know you guys can't mail out stuff to everybody, but not everybody has social media either. So I just think that it should be tabled. So until we can have a regular meeting. And okay, thank you.
Rebecca, do you mind if I mention something about the statutory requirements here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there is a requirement that for zones with under a certain number of parcels that a mailing be sent, and the only zone that we're proposing to change that complies with that is the industrial commercial zone, and the landowners in that zone were notified by mail that a zoning change might affect them. But in terms of the other zones, there's no statutory requirement to do any type of direct mailing there. So the board did consider that.
Is this considered spot zoning?
Not at all. It's by far the farthest thing from it, sir.
Well, that First Amendment there's more than one amendment in there. There's about 4 or 5 in there, the way I read it. So to me, the whole thing is spot zoning, and I think that's illegal.
John, and then I think I saw Frank, and then Regina.
Longview Farm is.
Yes, I would like to.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
John first. I was trying to put people up on deck, but
Okay.
that didn't work.
All right.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, I'd like to support Henry and Mike's and Dean Yetton's proposal. Due to COVID and everything else, there are a lot of people that are disenfranchised on this, and they need to have the opportunity to speak. They will be able to speak at the polls, but I really think we need to, under the circumstances and everything, give people, once we're able to assemble and get a large number of people that do not have the technology, give them the opportunity to come in. Because again, they will speak, and they'll speak at the polls, and I just don't think this is appropriate to bring it forward at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Frank?
Yes. I had just completed an inventory of our business community on Main Street and trying to get a handle on the sense of direction of the types of businesses that we would try to enhance both Main Street and Tenny Mountain Highway. But due to the virus pandemic here, all the businesses' systems have changed. So my whole inventory is no longer valid, and we need to re-evaluate the types of businesses that are done in different zones. And I think the other thing we're missing is we need a visual aids of what represents the activity in the agricultural zone versus the new labeled zone side by side, so people can see what the rationale or benefit to their situation is. And so I think this should be tabled until we can come together, because a lot of us are technology challenged to get online, and the other part is people are worried about coming together personally until we get our shots and get this virus or pandemic stabilized. So I recognize all the work that the board has done in doing this, but I've spent quite a few years doing inventories of our business, our natural environment, potential for what we do in our zones. But I think we need to step back and maybe reevaluate our assumption of our parameters that we're using to make the decisions to change the zones or what we do in the zones. So I recommend tabling this action. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Regina, can you state your name for the record and then go ahead?
Hello, my name is Regina Ronaldo, and my husband Nate Everts and I own and operate Longview Farm in Plymouth. And we are in the agricultural zone and are actively farming. And at this point have no plans of changing that. I guess I just kind of partially echoing what Frank was just saying about just, this is maybe more of a question sort of slash statement, is that my understanding is that the changing of the name from agricultural to rural doesn't at this point necessarily change how you make use of that land. So being a rural, naming it rural, you can still have agricultural activities on your land and on that space. It does not restrict or limit. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, our intention was to remove uses from titles because we find it is very confusing for applicants. That if there's an implied use in the name of each zone, it confuses the matter. So that was our intention.
Thank you.
Bridget.
Hey there, I'm Bridget Powers from Plymouth. Just to make a couple of points, I think there was a long and arduous process to develop the master plan, which speaks to the desires of the people of Plymouth, which we can't now start the process over again in this forum. I think the desires of the residents have spoken in the master plan, and we need to stay true to that. I think personally, the problem that I have with the title of the agricultural zone is it's not only agricultural. Anything goes in the agricultural zone, and I think that's an issue that needs addressing. And as far as tabling and waiting, you know, in our small communities here, we've seen a massive COVID migration. The population in our local schools has increased vastly. I think we can expect more of that due to climate migration in the very near future, which if anyone's been listening to the news, that's a hot issue on the table. And to wait probably is not as prudent as being prepared to be adaptable in a nimble fashion.
Thank you. All right, any new voices that we haven't heard from on this amendment? Bruce, go ahead.
Yes, couple things. First of all, having traveled extensively throughout the United States into communities that have tried to do this, of making 3-acre lots as opposed to 1-acre lots. I've seen that it ends up that you have a house every 3 acres and no real open land, because the people have their house and then they have their outbuilding and then they have another building out on the back acre, and it actually tends to cause the development of significant more land than you would have if you had 1-acre lots. The other thing is changing the name from agricultural to rural is going to give people the idea that it's just a rural environment. They're going to move into what is now the agricultural area, and then they're going to complain about people having chickens next door. They're going to complain about people having deer next door. They're going to complain about farmers getting out at 6 o'clock in the morning during the summer and starting their tractor up and operating their land. They're going to complain about people having sawmills. They're going to complain because they think it's just a rural, picturesque area, whereas right now it's agricultural. It's agricultural. That's what it was designed for, and that's what it is. And people should be able to maintain an agricultural business on their land without the neighbors complaining about, well, I moved into this house to be in a rural environment, and now they've got chickens that crow at 4 o'clock in the morning and they don't like it. So they need to know when they move into what is the agricultural area that it's agriculture. It could be anything. It could be animals, could be crops, it could be anything that's agriculture. And if you change the name to rural, you're going to end up with problems down the road. That's all.
Lucas? You're still on mute. Can you please unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
My name is Frank McLeod. I signed in with the wrong account. I'm sorry. I've lived in the same zone here for my entire life, and I just don't see any reason to change the zone at this point in time. What is the advantage of changing it to rural and changing your lot size?
I think we've addressed this a few times tonight. The idea is to maintain open space. And that's the intention.
Well, but I have a 5-acre lot, so now you're telling me I can't subdivide it and build a smaller home when I retire, and I think that's really infringing on the plans that we've had for years. I don't think it's a fair change.
Thank you. Karen.
Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm old. I spent part of my life in Plymouth. I don't live there now, but I do own land there. My siblings and I own a lot of land there. And I'm sitting here listening. In my work life, I served on comprehensive plans, on 2 different comprehensive plans for 2 different towns. I know the amount of effort and work that goes into these kind of things, master plans and things of that nature. When I sit here and I listen to the fact that the livelihood of these agricultural people could be detrimental if you put in this change, I feel like you're rushing it. I realize it's been going on for a while, but I feel like you're rushing it because you've got to get it to the town vote. I think you need to wait. I think you need to hear from the agricultural people that they can sit down with you and do the planning, because they're the ones that are affected. I get it that people have moved from somewhere else and they've got their little 3-acre piece or 5-acre piece, or they're worrying about something being developed around them. But you got to remember, I'm Michael Ahern's sister. I'm Omer Ahern's sister. And my parents have a farm that Michael now owns that's been how many years, Michael? 300 and something years in their family. Maybe not quite that much, but as a family, as a sibling to my family, We own like 250 acres. And you do something like this and our land value will drop, as will the agricultural people, and which affects the taxes for the town. As I said, I've served on 2 comprehensive plans for 2 different communities. I was a real estate broker. I ran 2 chambers of commerce. I know the effects that the changes that you're going to do could be harmful and detrimental to these people that have owned their land for how many years. I'm Bruce's cousin. I'm Henry David's cousin. I'm Ina's cousin. So I would hate to see you rush into something just because you've got to get it on the ballot. I think you have to listen to the people that spoke tonight and say, okay, we need to table this, and we need to say, all right, we need to take another look at this, and we need to have input, rather than rushing into things and being detrimental to the owners that are the taxpayers. When you're talking about how many thousands of acres are owned by people that are in the agricultural business, that are running tree farms or deer farms or crop farms, and they need to be respected, they need to be listened, and you need to not rush into something that could be very, very detrimental to their businesses, to their land. And I hope that you are, we're also dealing with COVID, and yeah, a lot of people are not good at getting out and understanding the technological stuff. They're not going to go to a meeting and wear a mask for a couple hours. They live in fear of getting this. People are dying from it. So I'm asking you to table it and to say, okay, what's another few months? What's another year? What's wrong with sitting down with the people that are in the agricultural zone that own the majority of the land and saying, you know what, we want to hear from you. If we're going to change something, we need your input, because what you can share with us will be valuable. And leave it as agriculture. Like Bruce said, they're going to move in, think it's rural, and all of a sudden they're going to be farming. Somebody's farming early in the morning. They've just put out the stuff that makes everything smell, and they're all upset, and they're on the phone saying, wait a minute, and we hear this all the time from people that move in. And
Karen, I'm gonna stop you there. You've reached your 3 minutes, and I'm going to see if there's anybody else that wants to speak.
Yes. What's that? Yeah.
Nobody else got cut off.
It looks like Kevin French.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, if you can hear me. One of the things that worries me about this is these ordinances, a lot of them represent takings from the property owners, and I'm not sure that they're takings that are really necessary. Like I've said before, and like other people have mentioned, that when you increase lot size, you create a sprawl into the rest of the land, and a lot of it is unnecessary. And the other point of it is that you've talked about the people that you've heard from in the community. Well, you've heard from an awful lot of the people in the community that actually own the property. And I really think it's incumbent upon you to take their directive, because they are the ones that have been the stewards of this property. And in my career, I've always found that the landowners are better stewards than any organizations that control them. And I think that it's commendable to the town people that have done such a good job with their agricultural land there. And I don't see how any of these things are beneficial to them. And I think it's a severe taking of their property rights. And I think that should be considered going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Other new comments? Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just want to bring some clarity to some comments that people have made. I totally agree that the agricultural zone used to be well named, but was very poorly controlled in terms of what kind of uses were allowed on it. So those of you that are arguing that agriculture implies agriculture, all you have to do is look at Tenny Mountain Highway and the Riverside Landing development which was zoned agriculture, to understand that agriculture does not mean agriculture necessarily. So I think I understand the intent of this amendment. And I also understand that there's some concern about unintended consequences. But the agricultural zone, in my opinion, very much needs to be modified in terms of what's allowed on it. And I would love to hear more discussion. Unfortunately, it does sound like that might mean, waiting or letting it vote and, having people decide on that. But ultimately, we don't want unintended consequences for people who are truly doing agriculture. But I really do want to argue that, but the name alone does not protect it from being developed very, very heavily in ways that nobody thinks of as agricultural. That's all.
All right. Karen, I wanted to circle back to you if there's no other comments to let you finish what you were saying, if you want.
I'm not good at this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Basically, again, what I want to say is I would like you to table this and pull together a committee that's made up of the larger owners, of the people, like Bruce and Mike and Henry David, and some of the other people that are doing crops, or they're doing trees, or they're doing things to have a business, so that what is being done is not detrimental. I think that rushing into this could cause undue harm to them. And I think it's worth waiting and getting their opinions. And yes, I understand there's been a lot of time given to this master plan, and you guys have put a lot of hours into it, but I think you have to listen to the people that are going to be mostly affected by it. I don't see them, the ones that I mentioned, turning around and trying to sell a 1 acre lot. They're trying to run a business, and it'll probably stay in, going forward, it'll stay in their families. And you don't want to do something that's going to be detrimental to them. So let them give you their ear, let them speak to you, and sit around and figure out if you're going to change it, or if you can make some modifications that will not negatively affect them. I think it's worth the time and putting it off. Take that out of the vote that has to go on the ballot, and just say, wait, we've given it thought. My greatest concern is that you're listening to these people and then you've already got your minds made up. Or you're going to say, you know what, they don't matter. We're going to go with what we've already decided because we put all this time and effort into it. And then what will happen is they'll have to wage a campaign to get it voted down. And we're dealing with COVID. We're dealing with a lot of other stuff in this world. I think it's worth taking the time and listening to them. And that's my 2 cents.
I see a couple hands raised. We're getting on pretty considerable length of time now, so I want to give those folks whose hands are already raised a chance to talk, and then I want to bring it back to the board really quickly. I see 4 different people with hands raised. But I think we need to bring it back to the board after that point. I see 5 hands raised now. Okay, 5 more comments. All right, we can't keep like we gotta put a pause on this at a second. So Grace, go ahead. You're on mute, Grace.
Thank you. Sorry. Real quickly, I just don't see that these changes are going to eliminate the ability to do agricultural work in this zone. I just want to say that I think it's great that you're focusing on permitted uses versus suggesting some changes to the permitted uses, because right now, like I said before, it's kind of a free-for-all what you can do in the agricultural zone. So if you are going to go ahead and table this and have a conversation, I hope that different groups of landowners in the ag zone can be represented. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Jen?
I just want to support actually what Grace just said. And with all due respect to the Aherns, I feel as though they're protecting their own interests. And while I respect that, I believe that there are many other landowners within this agricultural area. When Chris and I first came here to build, one of the things that was said to us by the town was, you can do whatever you want in the agricultural zone. And I think that this proposal put forward by the planning board would help mitigate that kind of attitude. And I feel it's really important to conserve the open space that we have here. It's one of our most precious resources. So I question what the problem is if you are practicing agriculture and large scale farming, what the problem is with allowing 3-acre parcels versus 1-acre parcels. I'm not seeing the logic in that. And I really hope that this moves forward. We've been working on this for a very long time, and I think people do know about it. So I just raise those points. I hope that we can move forward and conserve the precious resources that Plymouth has in the agricultural areas.
I saw Regina next.
Hi. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to also make a comment. So we have 119 acres, and we're farming a significant amount of that. Farming is our livelihood. We don't have any other jobs. The farm is what sustains us. And in looking at this, because we are fairly new actual Plymouth residents, so this was brought to our attention recently. And so, but in looking at it, I feel like the only way that this would be detrimental to our farming operation and agriculture for us is if we decided that we wanted to subdivide the land and, as people who want to maintain an agriculture in this area that is the farthest from our sites right now. And so I think that, I guess I'm also kind of echoing what Jennifer was just saying, that it's sort of counter to my thinking that this is actually in some ways protecting us, because we have no desire to subdivide, right now. So that's all.
Matt Yeton?
Hi, I just want to state that I think, the planning board has done a great job in, putting their time in for the last 2 years, using the information that was derived from the master plan. But I think, Ina Ahern brought up some great facts that these don't necessarily coincide fully with the master plan. And everyone here in this room wants to talk about it more. Being, with COVID and everything going on and people not knowing about it, looking back at the minutes from January 7th, even after the meeting concluded and the board was discussing that this was an extremely passive public notification, which is what happens a lot with the town, right? It's out of your control to a degree. Social media, public notices, but it was, discussed how passive it was. But it was also mentioned earlier on the meeting, January 7th, that don't worry about what happens in the future because there's always a paper trail. And I don't know if that's the exact quote, but there's always a paper trail to go back from. And I guess my question is, in all this planning, there was never any discussion of, who or what property owners have had opposition to this in the past, and why don't we specifically bring this conversation to them, knowing that it's going to end up January 21st, 2021, and we're all having this discussion? Because I don't feel like that is a good argument that there's a paper trail that leads back to everything, because in this case, it wasn't looked at. And people weren't reached out to and the phone wasn't picked up. And I really understand that you guys have a finite amount of resources to work with, and that being time. But with that being said, I look forward to this being tabled and as many people as possible in here committing to talking about this, as that was also a concern raised on the 7th of January, is that, once this gets tabled, we're just not going to talk about it for a year. But I fully commit myself, and I'm sure other people in here commit to that discussion as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Michael Cloud?
I've lived in this house for 40 years, and we are planning to retire soon. And to tell me that I can't subdivide this property to downsize, I think is at this point is just, it's not what was planned on. It's not how the property was laid out for us in our past, how we planned. And I don't think it's fair for the committee to change it at this point.
Thank you. All right, Mike Ahern, and then I'm going to cut off the public comment for the time being. So go ahead, Mike. You're on mute.
To reply to Jennifer Morris, I don't want to subdivide my property. I want to keep it together. I have 3 kids, and my property is in a T shape. Use this as an example. There's 800 feet along Route 3, and then it expands much further in both directions. You put a 150-foot lot of road frontage, and then to make 300 feet, to make a 3-acre lot, you're to the railroad tracks, cutting off my property from one end to the other. No intention of subdividing, but if I want to put a lot for one of my children, and then for one reason or another, it sells or goes outside of the family, I no longer control it, and I've just fractured my farm. So these things need to be considered. And I know the planning board's worked hard on this. There's no reason that it has to be done this year. It can wait. This happened in 2006. We asked the planning board to hold off and invite our committee to sit down, and we did. It was myself, Rhonda Bishop, John Kelly, and a couple others, and we sat with the planning board. We worked out what would work for the ag zone, and everybody seemed happy, and it went away. And all of a sudden, there's new people in the community or new people on the board, and all of a sudden they forgot what happened just a few short years ago. So I would really encourage the planning board, it's nothing personal against any of you, to consider tabling this. Let's sit down. You have my word, I'll be there. I spent how many years volunteering for this town on the planning board, how many years sitting in the select board for very little money. There's a lot of people that are willing to volunteer their time to make some sensible use of some proposed changes. If there need to be, let's do it. If not, let's not, but let's include the ag zone people in this.
All right. So just want to bring this back to the board a little bit here before we look at amendment number 2. I think amendment number 3. I think a lot of the comments that we've heard on amendment number 2 will carry forth to amendment 3. So I want to discuss with the board what we want to do. Do we want to table this and spend another year workshopping through this, working with all of our, 40 volunteers now that are interested in zoning in the agricultural zone and want to help us shape Plymouth for the better into the future? Or are we, since we can't make any changes beyond minor editorial changes, we're kind of locked into the language that we have right now. So with that in consideration, I'm looking to the board now to see, do we want to table this for a year, or do we want to move forward and put this to our voters?
I would like to thank everybody who has shared their perspectives on the proposed amendments already, both those speaking in favor of moving forward, recognizing the work that the planning board has done to this point, but also thanking the people who've been opposed and come up with some, very valid points about, ways that the amendments could be more specific to town. And I would propose that we remove this and not move forward with this for the warrant this year.
Yeah, I would second what Phil said. I jotted down a couple of thoughts just in listening to everyone tonight. I think tonight was an even better meeting than last time, which was really informative, I think, as a planning board member, to hear from folks and to have over 40 people talking about zoning and the future of Plymouth, to me, is a success. And so because Matt and Mike and others said they would help us with it, I feel really comfortable moving forward with people's help. I just hope it's clear to everybody that you can see just in the comments tonight what the planning board's charged with trying to balance. Really conflicting views, but there's probably an awful lot of common ground. And so I think if we can use the master plan as a starting point and come together and figure out what it is we all can agree we want to make sure we're guiding for the future, then we can sort out what the right tools are. But the fact of the matter is, as far as COVID, it's not likely we're going to have lots of in-person meetings for a while. And we need to get started on this spring so that we can start having public hearings even earlier next year by November. So if we could start through our planning board work sessions and in this format, and ask each of you who do participate to help us reach those that aren't as comfortable or don't have access to technology. And then we'll be that much further along when we can come together in person. I think it would be wonderful, and I want to thank everyone.
Yeah, I echo Steve and support. I think that's the biggest concern. I think we need to wait, but we don't want to wait too long to continue these conversations. We're just going to end up back at the same place. Yeah. So I would plead that with everyone here.
Yeah, I agree too as well. I think that, obviously we've heard a lot of good arguments on both sides of the fence. I think it'll be important for everyone on the call to think about what type of compromises they're willing to make, if any at all, because that's going to be the big question when you have two different sides to an issue. And hopefully as a group of, I think we're actually up close to 50 people, we can come together and find a reasonable solution to the problems that we face. So just in closing, I would just thank everyone for coming out. It's been certainly a learning experience for me. I joined the board a few months ago, and the first few meetings I was on, it was just the planning board members, and it's nice to see other people in town getting involved and partaking. So hopefully that will continue as we push this decision out for another year. Thank you.
I agree with the other board members. I think there's strong and valid opinions on both sides, and it needs to be hashed out. There's a path through this that's going to make everyone, if not happy, at least satisfied with the results. But it's going to happen soon, because the changes that are coming to this area are going to be coming quickly and in the near future. So the conversations need to start right away.
Yeah, I also just want to echo what everyone else is saying. I mean, I heard a lot of really strong, heartfelt concern, and it's kind of on both sides, but in many ways, it's also a lot of common concern for the same sorts of things and different understandings of how to get there. And to hear these conversations play out a little bit further and disentangle questions of language from questions of lot sizes and, agricultural versus rural versus then, the benefits and drawbacks of different lot sizes. I think there's a lot of common ground to work on and kind of figure out how to get there in a way that is probably not going to make everyone happy totally, but certainly allow us all to be heard a bit more thoroughly. Thank you all for great comments.
So I think the board, we're going, has decided we will table this. We don't need to take a vote to not move it forward, right? June?
Given that you've put it forward, I think it would be wise to take a vote to decide on this. And remember, you have all three amendments. So is it going to be on all three, or the first two that you've only really had the hearing on?
Okay. So is the board good to not hold a hearing for amendment number 3, that hearing our feedback on amendments 1 and 2, we're good to take make a vote that we're going to table?
Losing you, Rebecca.
Yeah, Rebecca, I think we lost you. Do you want to try again?
No, I think that means you can make a motion when she comes back on.
Actually, I don't think I can make a motion, but I'll take over. So I will enter, as Rebecca is temporarily unable to connect with audio as the vice chair, I will take over the meeting for now. And I will entertain a motion from any member of the board if you'd like to either move these forward or decline to move these forward as a group.
I move we table all three amendments until the issues can be worked out in a group.
I think as a point of clarity, I don't think we can table these, because if they are still proposed and on the books for the next year, they may actually still be in effect. So I would propose that we revise the motion to not move these forward this year, but to reconsider.
Continue is the word.
I so move.
Thank you, Carl. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. We got at least 1 or 2 seconds. So I'll do a roll call vote from the board. Carl?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And is Rebecca back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, there you go. I will cede control of the meeting and let you take over again, but we did vote in the affirmative to not move these forward.
Great, thank you. I meant to say this at the beginning of the meeting, that some reason my camera cuts out and I have to unplug it and plug it back in. And I can hear everything you say when I do that, just as a warning. So, okay, so we have removed these from consideration. They will not go to a vote in March. And I do want to say thank you to everybody for the participation. It feels like in a lot of this process, we've been wanting participation, and this is what we want to have as a dialogue about all these things. So please get in touch with the town hall if you want to participate. We certainly have a list of who's spoken tonight. So I would like to just give folks, I think a lot of the comments on Amendment 3, I think most of what we heard on Amendment 2, I think applies to Amendment 3. So I'm not inclined to open up for more discussion, because I think we've heard a lot of different voices and a lot of ideas and a lot of really good comments tonight. So I would like to move on to our any new business that we might have. Oh no, sorry. Oops. Next is communications received by the board.
Can I make
Do
a
we
statement,
have?
Rebecca?
In fact, David Kent is trying to say something.
Okay, go ahead, David.
I'm on the zoning board, and we met with the previous code enforcement officer planner, and we recommended strongly that we use the Plymouth Record Enterprise to communicate with people rather than the Laconia paper, because it is much more centered on what's going on here in Plymouth. And we also noticed that most of the other towns, in fact, use the Record Enterprise for advertising hearings. And you may have had greater participation in this at an early stage had you used the local newspaper. That's all. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the noticing of things is beyond the scope of what the board actually does. But we did write press releases, letters to the editor. We've reached out into the Record Enterprise a number of times. But yeah, point is noted. Thank you. Okay, communications, June.
Just want to make note that I had emailed midday or so a couple of more letters regarding the zoning amendments. So you have those in your email, and they relate to the discussion about the amendments, which are now we're not going forward with. So I don't think we need to go through reading them all, but you have those. Any questions about them?
I think it would be great if we could maybe incorporate all the comments we heard tonight, get those into the document that we shared earlier in the meeting, just so we have a record of the comments summarized instead of having to read back through old minutes. It would just be good. If that's possible, that'd be great. So. Was that it for correspondence?
Yes, sorry.
Any new business from the board? All right. So I think we're skipping through a few things. I think we need to move the planning board bylaws to our next work session. If that works for everyone. So if everyone can review the document that June sent around with all the information for this meeting with the suggested edits. And then we can read those edits into the record if we all agree, and then vote on it at our next meeting.
So Rebecca, I just wanted to point out, you skipped over the informational pre-application review. We did have a conceptual request for a conceptual review that was submitted, but then has been withdrawn. So that's why you skipped over it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was
let the rest of the board.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it had been withdrawn. Thank you.
Yep.
It may come up in February, so we will.
All right.
To be determined.
Thank you. I will process out loud what I'm thinking as I go through this. Is the board good to do the bylaws next work session, since this has been a long meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Expect ripping and exciting response from the public when we review our bylaws. So we'll see if we get 50 people for that. All right. Other business from members of the board and planning staff. June, do you want to introduce? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things that I put on there. I also emailed out to you, and it's posted now on the town's website, the calendar for 2021 planning board meetings and work sessions. And I had talked to Rebecca about trying to maybe kind of go back to making sure the work sessions are for work sessions, so we can get through these types of zoning things and possibly some other good planning work, and try to really focus then on the third Thursday of the month more towards the applications. There may be times when we have to kind of spill into that work session for applications, but trying to make sure the purpose of the work session is to have the time to do good planning. So we'll try to work with that. So you have that calendar, it's on the website. The second item, I just as a point of information really, was Plymouth Village Water and Sewer. I think it was last week, had a couple public meetings. And if people didn't have the chance to attend it, there is a video of it on the Plymouth Village Water and Sewer website. And this is regarding the Main Street water sewer replacement project that the town is also going to be participating in, hopefully with some stormwater drainage improvements. And so it's a big project coming forward. The timeline, they indicated at that meeting, it can still have some adjustments and changes to it, but could start in fall of 21 with some limited work, but the real bulk of it would be kind of in the construction season of 2022, maybe spilling into the spring of 23. There was a lot of comments that would be, with some adjustments, but that's sort of the plan for right now. So obviously it'd be very disrupted in our downtown area, but they are trying to do as much of the work at nighttime. So that could be, again, adjustments, uncertainty. They're looking for feedback about what residents, business owners, that kind of thing needs. So just, it's a good thing to take a look at that video if you haven't had a chance to, just get a better sense of the scope as they are still working in the town and the water and sewer to pull this thing all together. So it'll be a pretty major rebuild, which is greatly needed. So take a look at the video.
Great.
That's all.
All right. So the second to last thing on the agenda is public comments. Before, and I realize I never closed the public hearing before, so, before I open it up to comments, I'd really just ask people, just in the interest of everybody's time, that just if you have anything to contribute aside from the zoning work that we'll be continuing, that I would invite you to speak now, but yeah, please try to not cover anything that's already been covered. So does anyone wish to speak? Neil.
I just want to thank the board for all your hard work and your consideration. Thank you.
Dean? Oh, you're on mute.
You hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, yeah. No, thank the board for all their work, and I'm sure that all of us will be more than happy to get together and see if we can iron some of this stuff out. So, thank you.
Bridget.
Having been on the board, I want to say this is one of the best attended meetings I've ever been to. And I noticed a lot of good information available on the town website, which has not been always the case. So thanks to the board for being so communicative. And I think again, the attendance is great, the best I've ever seen. So somehow the word got out.
I'm looking for hands here.
Rebecca?
John, go ahead.
Yes, having served on the board for 7 years and served with several of you, I just really want to thank you guys for listening and paying attention, and hopefully we can work on this year and get everything taken care of. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Rebecca, Henry Ahern has his hand up.
Henry, go ahead. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank the board for listening to the people in the town and giving us the opportunity to do that. And make sure you get my name on the list if you're trying to get people together to see what's going on. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Matt?
Yes, likewise. Just thank you to everyone for listening tonight. And in the past meetings, I wasn't able to attend those, but I was able to review them. Thanks again. And it doesn't go unnoticed that all the work you guys have done over the past couple of years working on this. And I feel it's sort of unfortunate that, it might feel like we're taking away from that, but I look forward to moving forward with it and really bringing it to where more people feel it needs to be. Thank you for all your work you've put in so far, and look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank the planning board as well for listening. And someone said, I'm sure that there are some common ground, and I would like to work towards that as well. And I would like to be put on the list with Henry Ahern and serve on that committee.
Thanks, Mike. Omer Ahern, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear
Because
you.
I'm not very technical either.
We can hear you loud
I
and clear.
want to thank the board, and I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to us. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Somebody on this call knows where to get me. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. All right. So if there are no other public comments and nothing else from the board, we do have one last thing on the agenda. And that is adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Oh, I need to close the public hearing. I'm closing the public hearing at 8:30 and then we can have a.
I'm distracted because I want to know who Neil's cat is, but other than that, I will move to adjourn.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Thanks, Marianne. Okay, I will read the roll. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Steve?
Aye.
Carl?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.